just stories anymore.
Not just reading it on a page, seeing it in front of me.
Wait a second, let me brag on my God. Get the truth, yeah, ain't showing off. Yeah, I promise you never took a loss. If I'ma tell it, I gotta tell it all. Wait a second, let me brag on my God. Get the truth,
That's my theme song, y'all.
you can count it and never took a loss. And if I'ma tell it, I gotta tell it all. Hold on, wait a second, let me brag on my. Every time I think about your love. Finally got somebody
Edit
I can
that out.
trust. Why you keeping me? I really just don't know. You can
Hello. Welcome to Conversations with Kenya. Let's talk about it, right? Thank you guys for joining me tonight in this amazing space and place. I'm so excited to be here. This thing is dear to my heart. And tonight we're going to touch on the topic of drug addiction. Now, we know there are many addictions, but we chose drug addiction tonight. And so we're going to open up this can. Some places it's an elephant in the room, but it's things that need to be discussed. And so a lot of people that know me don't really know me. They just like, hey, they came in on chapter 40, right? They came in on chapter 40. I'm getting ready to enter into chapter 57, March 13, and I'm really excited about it. Excited to be launching tonight. The reason I chose this month, this year, because it marks 34 years that I've been free from crack cocaine. Now, I would like to hit that song right there. Let me brag on my God. But yeah, 34 years, you guys, I've been clean from crack cocaine. And my story is my story. It's not anybody else's story. And tonight we're going to share some stories and we're going to touch on some things concerning that. And I have some amazing guest speakers that's going to come and talk. I don't want to do all the talking because I share my story online. I want these amazing people who I really felt led to invite here tonight to give their perspective on what drug addiction means to them. As I said, 34 years clean, you guys, from crack cocaine. Now, listen, I'll be telling this story for a while, so we're going to stick with the topic tonight. But 34 years, I'm the mother of 7 amazing children, 13 grandchildren, and February 23rd, 1989, I looked out the window of my mother's yellow station wagon. I'm telling you, as I talk about it, I'm in that station wagon, and I said, God, I don't want to do this no more. And for the first time, I meant it. I meant it. In 3 years plus, on and off, I had been using crack cocaine. That was my choice of drugs. I ain't used nothing. That was my choice of drugs. 3 years on and off, I had been using, and I made a decision that day. I was done. And then I went home, the cocaine capital, to get free. Like, can you imagine being in Miami, Florida in 1989? Can anybody that know about Miami know? And so, yeah, it was a challenge, but I made a decision and I stuck with it. So tonight, you guys get to hear some other stories. I'm really excited about these guest speakers I'm going to bring to the stage. They are dear, dear to my heart. I'm going to ask all four of them to come forth, you guys, and we're going to get into this conversation. Yes, yes. Let's go. If you guys can pick up your mics, and we're going to have this conversation.
Don't be scared. We don't bite.
Yes. You're fine. Absolutely fine. Don't matter. I'm all. Doesn't matter at all. So I want to take a second to introduce briefly my guest speakers. I'll just start with Miss Cindy Burnham. We've known each other almost a year now, right? We sit on the board of Red Tent. We've both been able to share our stories, and I absolutely, absolutely love her and thank her for being here. I'll let her share who she is. Next to her is Melissa Green. We've met through the same organization, Red Tent. Absolutely love her. Story is amazing. And then we have Monica Smith. Wow, we've all met through Red Tent, right? Man, look how things bring you together. Powerful story. And then we have Mr. Scott at the end down there. I've probably known Mr. Scott the longest, and we've had lots and lots of conversations about different topics. And I will let each of them at their time get into who they are, what they do, and why they do it. So we're going to open up with Miss Melissa. And what we're going to do here, you guys, is we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to let them expound, elaborate, and just flow. Be who you are. And I know I don't have to worry about that with her. Be who you are, and there's no wrong and right.
Get comfortable.
Yes, ma'am. And yes, that's yes. And so the conversation begins. All right, but
Hello?
it can't. All right, so Melissa, I'm going to let Melissa introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her, and then we'll get into the questions.
My name's Melissa Green. I am a little over 2 years clean from drug addiction, substance abuse disorder, mental illness, and I mean, what else do you want me to introduce myself with without
Whatever
answering
you want to
anything
say,
else? You just want to...
just whatever you want to share with them about you.
Okay, so I was born and raised right here. I actually grew up in South St. Petersburg, Florida. I was born in Bayfront Hospital. I grew up in Queensboro. There used to be apartments over there. Me and my little sister, was just me and her. I, you know, growing up here, it was, I didn't understand what all of the race was. I didn't grow up like that. So none of that ever really pertained to me. So being part of this and hearing what this place is really about, I really love that. I didn't know that about this place. I growing up, it was just me, my mom, and my sister for a really long time. My mom had several boyfriends. She ended up marrying a couple of them. And, sex, drugs, and rock and roll was how it was when I was growing up. And, I don't think, and my mom did an amazing job being my mom. And I don't think that she was a bad mom at all. I think that how it was back then, I don't think we knew how it affected my generation and my sister's generation. And what happened was we became a product of our environment. And both me and my sister whom right now God willing, will one day maybe be here too, but she's out there and she left her children and decided to leave everything she loved and to stay out there and do what we think we're doing is partying, you know? And I'm very close to my mom. My mom is my best friend. My real father actually got sober. He has 35 years sober. September 2nd is his clean date. Yeah, so I grew up with, you know, all of that, but I also had some recovery in my life. Like I seen somebody overcome this thing, and I didn't understand what was going on, you know, because um, I just knew he went to this meeting with these people and they chanted and I don't know what's going on, you know. They say a prayer, but they also wear Harley jackets, you know, and all this crazy stuff. So I was really confused. I was 6 years old and I was emptying the ashtrays at a 2250 on Central Avenue in St. Petersburg, where my dad got clean 35 years ago. So this is my place. This is where my stomping grounds. This is where I used, and this is where I got clean, and this is where I choose to advocate for women, for mothers, for children, for families, for recovering addicts, for all of that. Like that's what I want to do because I remember the last time I relapsed, I said, God, if you just let me live, and if you just take this fucking obsession away from me, I will not live in vain. And that's what I've chosen to do. Like, I really have a life that I can't even believe it. Like, I was walking up and down this street a few years ago, prostituting. I can remember some of the gas station owners around here because they used to try to get me help all the time. I know a lot of the motel owners too because they used to try to get me to get help all the time. I knew a lot of the sheriffs and police department, and as a matter of fact, my mom's second husband, no, this is her third husband, his son, my now stepdad, is the Pinellas County Sheriff. And he was an undercover narc for a little bit, and he was a Pinellas County Sheriff, and he worked the streets that I ran. And you know, I love this town. I love this city, and I love everybody in it. And I love seeing that we're all coming together more now. Um, I love being a part of all of this. I ended up I had 4 children. I have 3 children I still have. I did give one up for adoption when I was really strung out on heroin. Her father was abusive and went to prison for it. And I did it because I didn't want her to know who her father was. I had 3 other children that I kept. One she's 6. She was born with a rare genetic disease. And she's what got me here. She is what made me an advocate, somebody who's not scared to stand up against people that you know, have abbreviations behind their name, who have doctrines and master's degrees, and I had the, you know, that was my baby. So, and she had a rare disease. So doctors never studied her disease, and I knew this, and I did. I've studied it for 6 years now, and I knew that, and I went to a conference with the $3,000 that I had in my savings account. And I didn't even have a driver's license at the time. I paid my cousin to drive me there and gave her a freaking Disney ticket so that I could go to this conference and she could go enjoy Disney so that I could learn and study her rare disease.
That's amazing.
And then come back to the hospital and advocate for her and said, this is what we're going to do.
That's
And I
amazing.
had to fight. Like, these people were not going to do it. Who are you, right? So with that being said, learning how to advocate for her as hard as I did, and I learned what advocacy really means. It means you're not there to make friends. You're not there to be buddies with everybody. You're supposed to advocate to save her life. That's it. You're going to make enemies on your way out, trust me. But at the end of the day, you know how many doctors, and I stood in front of the board at All Children's Hospital and was able to represent special needs moms. And, you know, and that's still what I have to do. I still have to go in front of people I'm intimidated by and am scared of, and, you know, and I learned how to do it, and now I'm confident, and those are my friends now.
He does it very well.
I'm not intimidated anymore. I know what my purpose is, and I don't let anything else deter that, you know?
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions.
Okay. Thank you. Because I can go on and on.
That's okay. No, I want them to know Melissa Green. So if you don't, I can't tell your story. You have to tell it. So that's just a little taste of it. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, because the topic here is drug addiction, is how has it impacted your professional relationships? So your drug addiction, how did it affect your or impact your professional relationships?
Well, when I was using,
Tell it.
we'll start there. I mean, the only thing I ever did before I got clean was I was a stripper, a bartender, and a server, and that's all I could ever do. I couldn't keep any of those jobs either. But when I got clean, I was still in the service industry. I had never finished college. I did complete high school early. I had a high GPA. I don't know how that happened. And I started to work my program. I believe in the 12 steps of recovery, and I apply them, and I apply spiritual principles to my life every day. And I have a higher power.
Well,
Trust
that's the
me, I
next
have a
question.
higher
You
power.
answering the next question.
Oh, see what I'm saying?
So the next question is,
Okay.
what works for you and your sobriety? And the reason I wanted to ask this question is that I believe different strokes for different folks. Like, I know many people that went to rehab, went to centers, and that wasn't my story. So what has worked for you these 2+ years, almost 3 years, keeping you sober?
So, Narcotics Anonymous is where I got and stayed clean. I also have other outside sources that I use. I am in therapy. I've been in therapy for 6 years. I needed that peace for myself. I had a lot
It's
of trauma
important.
that I was trying to heal and deal with, and you know,
It's
I was
important.
bringing that into the rooms in Narcotics Anonymous, so I had to start to deal with that. You know what I mean? And it became, prevalent that this thing was way more than just about stopping, putting down the dope for me. Way more
I
than
love
that.
it. I love it.
You know?
I love it. I love it.
Because even before that, I remember the first thing I was addicted to was fantasy. I still go there sometimes. But even as a little girl, my parents were partying and they had loud music on and they were having a good old time and we weren't allowed to join them, so we'd go in our room and I would dress up and I would like fantasize about being a princess or being on one of the women on the movies that the men, like were infatuated with, or so that was like the first thing I can remember escaping my reality with, and it just evolved from there.
So you have 4 children?
I had 4 children. I
You
have
have 3
yes.
now. And so my final question to you would be, what advice would you offer others? Because I know that you've shared with me that you have a handicap.
Mhm.
1 or 2?
1.
1. So what advice would you offer women that may be struggling? Because this is going to be played back. People are going to see this conversation. What advice would you share with the transition? Like, summarize what you just shared and what advice would you give people out there that may be still using, that may be on their first tip?
Right. You know, I think the best advice is to find a higher power, whatever that is. Maybe one day you'll call him God like I do. Not everybody
I
has
love
that.
that.
Some people
I
really
love that.
like are turned off by that, feel like that or whoever their higher power is disowned them and abandoned them, and that's why all that stuff happened to them. And at one point in my life, and when my daughter was diagnosed, believe me, I cursed him. I cursed my God. Like, I was angry. I had got my shit together, and you gave me a child that was, and you punished my child because of what I had done. It's how I felt, and it took me until one day she was, she was like on her deathbed, really. And I had like 30 people from the rooms come in her room and pray on her. And 2 days later, she was coming home. And they said she
Yes.
wasn't coming home.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And I remember I was like, okay, God, here you go again, showing out.
Wow.
You know, and I didn't stay clean right after that. It took a little while, but that was when my relationship with him changed. I had a relationship with him.
Right.
And that was the difference. Before I thought, I had this theory of what God was, and I didn't realize that the relationship is what I wanted. And that's what I search for in everything I do, is relationships. I want to build
That's
relationships. Awesome. Connection is the one thing that heals us. Nothing else does. Like love heals. That's the only thing that heals.
It does.
And I believe in that. And I want to say this. I was arrested 22 times.
Yes, I was.
For the last time I was incarcerated 9 years ago. I have not been incarcerated since. I struggled with sex addiction, drug addiction. I was an IV user. I contracted hepatitis C during my drug use. I did treat it and cure it. I'm lucky I didn't get anything else, and I have friends that did, and I'm really close and extremely supportive to them, because I'm blessed that that didn't happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that didn't happen, and that's it. It could have still happened if I continued to if I continued to live how I was. I would have been dead, one way or another. The streets or the drugs. It would have been quick and easy. And I'm grateful that that's just my story, and I can talk about it, and I can tell people there's hope. My whole thing, my favorite spiritual principle is hope. That's the one thing that, if you can find some hope, if you can give anybody a little bit of hope, that's all they need. They can run on that, because they don't have anything else. When I got clean, I didn't have anything but hope, because of what I seen other women do. That was it. I didn't have anything else,
Stories change lives.
Today, I work for 2 not-for-profit agencies. One is Red Tent, who they saved my life also. I was incarcerated in their jail, or in their program inside of Pinellas County Jail. I'm still part of that, and now I work for Barbara Rohde, who is also a mentor of mine. I also work for the first ever needle exchange program in Pinellas County. We actually launched 2 weeks ago. We've never had one here. It is going to be a movement. We want to stop spreading the infectious diseases, and we want to meet people where they're at and build those relationships I'm talking about, and then trust me enough to come to me and say, okay, I'm ready.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do.
Let's give her a hand, you guys. 'Cause it's not easy coming up here and sharing your story with the world. And so I just believe it's important that we do share our story. All right, and we're going to move on to our next. We were supposed to have a little music, but we didn't have a little music. All right. Yes. Next on the mic. Melissa, you said something about walking, and then my thought was, have I ever seen you and didn't reach out to you? That was my immediate thought. Like, I know, but still, like the other day, I saw that. Like, you know how some people are out and certain things disturb us, certain people in different ways. And when I see women walking the street, I always look at them and think that could have been me. So immediately, I don't get out the car, but immediately I go into prayer for them. And I ask God to protect them and keep them safe, because that could have been my story. Thank God it wasn't, but that could have been my story. So it's dear to my heart when you say that. So I have a different mindset towards that today. All right, next on the mic is Mr. Scott. Mr. Maurice Scott, founder of Peace for Life. Welcome, and I'll let you tell the people who you are, because most know you, though, but some may not.
Perhaps. My name is Maurice Scott. I was born and raised in Chicago. I was a very serious student and athlete, and drugs and alcohol came late in my life. I think I didn't really start drinking until I got to college. I came here to Florida on a football scholarship to Florida A&M University, and we were so poor, and I actually came on a bus 31 hours. I didn't have a suitcase, so I had a pillowcase, a quilt. My great grandmother made me, a sheet, and one pair of pants, two pair of shorts. That was my whole deal. But my mom drank, and her and I were very close. And she started dabbling in drugs, and I swore that would never be me. But I was always being her rescuer whenever she got into situations. Um, I graduated Florida A&M with the degree in criminal justice and psychology. But unfortunately, I also caught a case facing 15 to 60 years my senior year. And I went back and graduated with 10 years probation and eventually got U.S. Marshals picked me up in Chicago, um, brought me back to Florida. I was teaching, substitute teaching, and working in a group home with young boys. And they brought me back to Florida, and I got 3 years on that case. Um, when I got out, all I thought about was just changing the world. I actually had that first mind to change the world when I was in college, when my youngest brother was locked up at 13, and he was drunk, and I didn't even drink. And I figured I was going to change the world. But as I got out as an ex-felon, I saw how difficult it was to get a job.
Yeah.
And eventually, I wanted to quit. And one of the things I always was a good runner, so I ran home. But before I got home, I stopped in Tallahassee, where some of my old athletes and ex-friends were, teammates, and they were using powder cocaine. And I had seen it enough, but I had never touched it. But when you allow yourself to be in the presence of it, you become less sensitive to it and more desensitized. And all you need is a difficult moment. And that then I was feeling down, and they just offered to me, and eventually I tried it. After some time, I ended up coming back here in St. Pete and working as a manager at Mortgage Investors, and dabbled here and there, but it wasn't a big problem for me until one year. I think I had a part ownership in a company called Nova Financial, and the mortgage industry fell out, and so we lost a lot of loans. Also, my truck got repoed, and my mother died. And when she died and I was out of money, I noticed that I had a pretty heavy powder cocaine habit. And I picked that Crystal Inn down the street and got me a room and got enough drugs, threw a party, kicked everyone out, and decided that was going to be it. And in the process of getting ready to take my life, because I didn't want my sons to see this weak guy I had become, but I came to the realization that I was actually about to show them the weakest thing I could do and be a quitter. And in my mind, I guess I heard from God. It was April 21st, 2008. And he said, you don't want to die. You just don't want to live the way you're living. Just change the way you're living. And through a process, I started to go and visit friends. And we had a Bible study. And I heard the story about how Christ died for his bride. It just so happened that when God grabbed my life, it was at the same time my wife decided she had enough of my crap and she was leaving. But I said, I'm gonna fix this, family. I could do this, because I've always considered myself to be a man that do things other men couldn't. But one day I had had enough and to say, hey, I tried. I came back to the house to say, hey, I gave it all I could, and I'm going back to Chicago. I quit, and I saw my youngest boy come into the door. And his face was shining, and I figured he was smiling. I smiled to greet him, and when he got close, he was crying. And he said, Dad, I saw you. The last time you was here, a woman picked you up. You told me you weren't going to date anyone, and you weren't going to let the devil break our family up. I died at that point. And I decided if anybody's going to die for this family, it's going to be me. And I set about trusting God for the walk. Through trying to win my wife back and to love her through whatever she was going to go through and to be there for my family. I didn't know it was going to take 14 years. It was a hell of a walk. It was the best and worst time of my life. And morning, I think I was so broken one time, going back and forth to work. I had 3 promotions. I was the first African American to be a licensed operator here in the St. Petersburg as a wastewater plant operator. But at the same time, I was flying so fast that the guys who'd been there forever started attacking me. So they had a plan to get rid of me. So it became to a point that they were physically jumping in my face. There was a 1.5 year investigation, and then there was a 2.5 year federal investigation. At the time, I go home and I get anxiety, couldn't sleep but an hour because I'm dreaming about what my wife might be doing. So I decided to start drinking. I blacked out and I woke up in the crack house. And I remembered my mom was doing crack, and I said, maybe if I do this, my mind, I won't remember the pain that I'm feeling. And I tried it, and like I did everything in my life, I did 150%. I pushed, and every time it whipped my butt, and every time I came back, I said, I'm going to win. And just like the casino, those houses are made to win.
That's right.
And couldn't sleep, couldn't work comfortably at work, couldn't rest at my home, and many nights up doing crack cocaine. And it was September 17th. I told God, here I am. I'm fighting at the job because I was the prime person to fight against this thing that was going on with black brothers there. No one had ever had the education, the work ethic. I had took the safety program and top safety throughout the state, and nobody had been successful enough to completely fight this thing. But then also I was fighting, holding up this thing at work, at home, trying to keep my family together. And find out I'm fighting this generational thing that my wife, my mom, and my dad's side of the family were all alcoholics, and my mom's side of the family were drug addicts. So I'm fighting this thing as well, and I'm like, God, I've been holding it. Why didn't you come? And he said, you thought you was holding it up. I need you to know that you weren't going to never realize how much you needed me until all you had left was me. And I enrolled in the Salvation Army 6-month program. And after about 3 weeks, my mind cleared, and I looked around and I saw all those guys there, and I'm like, oh God, all these guys is happening to them. What happened to me? And I wanted to do something. And I eventually went back to school while I was there and got a postgrad certificate in addiction studies and alcoholism and mental health disorders. And close to my 6-month graduation, I stepped on the back porch and saw a vision of me teaching them guys, and I stepped back off. I said, I ain't finna be here with these guys, God. And he said, you are these guys. Yeah. And I ended up being there for almost 28 months. And right when I was graduating, getting ready to leave, my son was murdered. And we all know the story of relapse, but I'll let you start with your questions now.
Yeah, no, that's powerful now. And here's what's happening up here. This is why we need these conversations, because I know each of these individuals, but I'm hearing stuff I've never heard. Me and Melissa have talked numerous hours, and I'm hearing stuff, and me and Maurice have talked, and I'm hearing stuff I've never heard. And I think that this is the reason the conversations need to be had, because there are other people dealing with some of the same things you guys are dealing with, dealt with, going through, went through. And so you touched on the first question I want to ask you, Maurice, is, and you touched on it, and I'm glad you did. I don't know if you looked at my questions, but how has your previous drug addiction, how has that affected your personal relationships? And then you're going to have to share a little bit, because most know you, but not all know that you've lost your son. So we have to touch on that. But I want to hear how it's affected your personal relationships, because I got stories about that, and it affects it.
Yeah, thank you for asking. If anybody in my family and in every place I go, I'm the leader. I'm the one that everyone calls when trouble goes down. I was a part of a gang back in Chicago, and when it got rough, they sent me a ticket, and when I showed up, it got right, because they didn't want me to get there, and it was still wrong. Just to be honest with you, I had over 16, 17 guys hunt me down, shoot at me, try to kill me, and I survived. I faced a lot, but I was always the person who saved everyone else. And when I fell down, it was horrifying for the family because they weren't used to me being weak. And for me, it was devastating to watch myself do that stuff I was doing. It's like one of my biggest survival techniques was that I had this ability to memorize anything I saw. And no matter what I was doing, I memorized the whole conversation and would play it back and forth. And I would see things that people didn't think they were showing me when they were doing things with me or around me. And I would see people for who they were, where when you're doing crack and that picture shows in your head and you can see that vivid when you come around, it horrified me. I cried and cried that I was a man who thought I was so strong, who was going to love my family, who was going to save my little brother and sister, who was going to love my wife the way I loved my mama, that I actually became the guy who was being neglectful to my children and my wife. That being there asleep on the sofa was not being present and noticing when my little girl came home when someone has done something wrong to her, not being there to ask those questions. When God showed me who I was, it horrified me because my ego was huge. I traveled across the United States and visiting different people and did whatever I want, but I was always held in high regard. But what he allowed was this guy who's walked around these cities and did what he wanted and had all his attention. He let people see me walk around this city with half a shoe walked off because I don't walk so much, and drugs got me strung out. So for my relationships, it messed up the people that I was accountable for. Yeah. And for me personally, it horrified me that I could be that man. Yeah. But it made me very, very sympathetic to other people.
Yes.
You know, it's like in AA, you do that 4-step where you say, okay, I'm mad at this person, I'm mad at this person, she cheated on me, they locked me up, and then you get to the point where, what was your part? And I'm like, oh, Lord, I actually stepped on all these people's toes. I was this big egotistical guy. And it's how I survived in Chicago, and it went well, but I hurt some people here based on the rules that we lived in Chicago when a lot of guys here are just flossing and pulling guns and talking trash. Where I come from, that would go down. So I made sure they never did that to me again. And God showed me that my best thinking without him, I was wrong. And what happened was when I had told everybody how great God was, how he changed my life, and I had helped so many guys to overcome their illnesses and their mental health and their alcohol and drug addictions, I said, God, it's great. And then I got ready to leave, and they shot and killed my son. We had just had dinner. I just told him that God had a plan for him. And the last thing he said was the same thing we've been saying to each other since he was young. Me and you, Dad, 2 peas in the pod. Always is, always was. I said, I love you. Go take care of your business. I'll see you tomorrow. 30 minutes later, they was telling me to rush because they was pumping them full of bullets. And my hand, I couldn't get it into the ignition. I had to grab it with my other hand to push it in. And all I could remember was Lauren Daigo's song, I Would Rescue You. And I was going to get there to put my body in between those bullets and my son, and I never made it. And it broke me. It broke me because all the people who I had helped and defended and protected, I couldn't do that for my own son. And then I felt helpless because here I had a mother, my wife, who had 9 months with a child, an experience I have no idea what she's mourning about. And I felt helpless because I couldn't help her. But what God had told me was that in order for my family to heal, it was about love and forgiveness. Now, the people who knew who I used to be thought I was crazy. They flew in town, said they're ready to do this and that, and I said, no, I got to trust God on this. And they said, you don't have to do anything, we'll take care of it. I'm like, no, I got to trust God on this because this family has to heal, and I had to make sure that they heal. And I loved them with everything I had, And my wife still saying, okay, when you get done making us feel good, you still got to leave here and go back into that room you sleep at every night. And I would cry there, and I'd come back the next day, and my oldest would be about to bust crying. He said, Dad, I tried to hold it while you was gone. I said, no, son, this is my job, not yours. Release that to me.
Yeah.
And I hugged him, and he fell in my arms and let it go. But that was my job.
So, share with us where you are now on your journey. Share with us where you are on your journey.
Well, I have to say that last summer I had a relapse. I have to say that. One thing my coach told me when I left Chicago, he said, go 150. If they go 100, go 150. If they go 75, go 150. If they go 50, make them kick you out. So I've always know how to give it everything I had. I've always succeeded at everything I ever tried to do. And I pushed that hard when it came to trying to save lives. We created a nonprofit in my son's name. I wrote a pledge against gun violence called the Black St. Pete Pledge. In the first 30 minutes, about 57 guys signed up. And as of last year, we got about 5,000 in the city. And also, he gave me a training program called 5 Keys to End Gun Violence among young people that he had me to create. And just last year, we had over 400 kids adopt nonviolent lifestyles because of the training that we had done. Multiple interviews, traveled from California to Chicago, all over, talking about what happened to our son. But what I found out last summer was that if I don't maintain balance, if I don't keep my faith and my recovery faith first, even with my best intentions to honor God and my sons, I can slip off the ladder. That I can fall off the wagon. And the moment that happens, everybody is at a disarray because I am the quiet and the peace in the storm. And my strength comes from God. You know, it's like he broke me down so much I don't have the fierceness to be who I was, because in my weakness he makes me strong. But when I speak, people hear the strength and they think it's me, but all the time it's him talking. So at the same time, I'm powerful and I'm weak.
That deserves a round of applause.
And so today, that's where I'm at, knowing that I am weak enough that I can have a relapse, but knowing I'm strong enough to do all things through Christ who strengthened me.
Yes, yes, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. That's powerful. That's powerful. And I'm going to let you guys know that this conversation has to continue because there are so many other things that I want to touch on that we don't get to touch on in this short period of time, but it's real. Drug addiction is real. Recovery is real. And I love what you said about that balance. You need that balance. Let me tell y'all something. My whole family think I'm a fanatic when it comes to Christ. I don't know nothing else. That's how I keep my sanity. That's how I stay sober. That's what works for me. So I understand when you talk about that balance. It's really, really important. So thank you for sharing your heart. I think this is his first time publicly talking about his relapse. Mr. Scott has a book coming out soon. What's the name of your book?
Or Marquise.
And
or Marquise.
yeah.
Yes. My son's name is Marquise. It was Fighting Goliath, but once I started writing, it just came out for Keys. So for Marquise, just everything that I went through, all the gang fights, all fighting for my mom, through college, everything, it works in the streets. So all these guys in the streets listen to me because of what I went through.
Yes.
And from the mayor to the chief to co-advocates to the streets, everything I've been through was for today. And it was all because what my son went through, that my purpose was born. I would rather have him back, but I trust God with the outcome.
Amen. And what's so exciting for me is that this is what I share with people a lot, is that, man, your story is so important. Your story is important. Monica's story is important. Melissa's story is important. Wait till y'all hear Cindy's story. Everybody out here's story is important. No, she has a whole, it's just important that, here's what I said. Maurice just said this earlier. He didn't repeat it. I say to people, if I tell my story, no, let me tell my story, because you can't tell it like I tell it. So if you met me in chapter 40, you don't know my struggle. You don't know I was addicted to crack cocaine for 3 years. You don't know that about my life because you entered it on chapter 40 and you don't know all the chapters prior to that. So let me tell it. So I'm always encouraging people, tell your story so nobody else can tell it, because can't nobody tell it like you can tell it, right? Y'all give Mr. Scott another round of applause. Are y'all enjoying the conversation? This is good, right? This is good. This is good. It's much needed. All right, and coming up, I think we're gonna let I had Miss Cindy up next, but I think I want you to close us out. So we're gonna, yeah, because she brings a different perspective. We're gonna open up with move on over to Miss Monica. She's gonna be on the mic. Coming to the microphone is Miss Monica Smith. Hey.
Hello. How are you?
Tell the people who Monica is.
My name is Monica Smith, and I'm originally from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've been here in Florida for 20 years, here in St. Pete, also Clearwater, and yeah, so in these 20 years, a lot has happened here in St. Pete, but I don't know. I guess I'll start off with just saying that I am my mom's fourth child of six. We're all mixed, white and black. So growing up, it was different, being like in Bridgeport, Connecticut, it's a little segregated. We have a lot of the blacks, Hispanics, and stuff like that in one city. So I just always felt different and weird. Just not fitting in anywhere. And so I daydreamed a lot too. Fantasized a lot, and some of the things that happened in my life kind of put me there. And so I romanced the idea of Barbies and houses and stuff. But
And Ken. And
Ken,
Ken.
yes,
Don't leave
yes,
Ken out.
and Ken, Barbie and Ken. But yeah, so growing up, it was fun in Connecticut. It was me and my brothers and sisters. We had a ball, and our parents. Well, my mom was never an addict or alcoholic, but she loved her alcoholic men. She married alcoholic men, and they partied a lot. And so all the kids go in the room, and they did their thing, and so we did our thing in the room, and it just, you never really know what was gonna happen. So but we had fun growing up, and it was a lot of dysfunction with my mom. My mom's second husband, he was very abusive, and so there was nights we had to sleep in the station wagon. We had to get out the house because he was beating her up again, or trying to get to us and stuff like that. So there was it was a lot of dysfunction, and he did a lot of things to all of us, and my mom wanted to get out of that situation, but she didn't know how. Her mom kind of disclaimed her for marrying him, and so finally there was a way out, and she sent me away. But I went to North Carolina, and I learned a little bit about healthy relationships, and so I think that kind of brought me back a little bit to what real people lived like. Like the whole world wasn't bad. All men aren't bad. Everything wasn't all bad. So, but it just kind of created this like weird space for me to where, like I said, I didn't fit in. It was change. It was chaos. It was dysfunction. And so I was always looking for an escape. And so when I found drugs, it brought me there.
Yeah.
It brought me there. I was able to. A lot of people say I don't know how I would deal, if it wasn't for the drugs, because life was not. I learned about God, but there was times where it wasn't enough. Like I didn't have,
Mhm.
like I learned God, but things kept happening, things kept happening, and things kept happening. So the drugs was my way out. And
I think most of us that have
yeah,
used, that's
yep,
it's that relief. It's that what gives you that relief, right,
right,
from what's
right,
going on. So
yep.
yeah. So question I want to ask you is how did, because we didn't touch on this yet, and I'm gonna tell you. So my plan was to have someone here, a child that had actually been affected growing up. Not saying none of us was, but I really wanted um, a child, not a child, a young adult, because my generation, I'm 57, and so those kids that were born to us, crack addicted people, like they've had their own struggles, and so we don't get to talk about what that was like for them.
Hmm.
So how do you feel like that affected your children? You have two sons, right?
I have three.
Three. How do you feel that affected your children then? And are there any side effects from your drug use?
So I lost custody of my kids. My oldest son, I had him at 17 years old, and so he pretty much he grew up with me, and so me going out and not being around and losing custody and not being in his life, it was hard on him. He didn't do well. He acted out. He was angry, and it just it definitely takes a toll on their perspective on life, because his dad was in Connecticut, his mom is out on drugs. My This is when like the who's in jail kind of thing was big,
I love
and
it.
I guess he looked me up. He looked me up and saw that I was arrested for
Wow.
prostitution.
Wow.
And how does your son
Wow.
deal with knowing that this is their mom, the mom that they knew to love, how are they going to deal?
Wow.
And so he dealt with that on his own. He still has issues with that, trust issues. He doesn't allow himself to open up to people. Me and him had to work on our relationship once I got sober, and it took a long time. And actually, in recovery is my mentor, who is Miss Cynthia Burnham. I love her,
Mhm.
but taught me how to be a woman, a mom, a daughter, and even though there's this dysfunction, it's like you show up anyway. Even if it's in
Yeah.
small spurts, you deal with it. You don't give up. And
Yes.
so that, and then my middle child, because they're all affected differently.
Absolutely.
And so he prayed for me. I could do no wrong in his eyes, and he prayed for me. My mom used to say how he prayed for me, to come home, and they think it's them. I'll be good. It's whatever I have to do for her to come home. And
Wow.
so they have this idea that is something I have to do with them. But addiction is so baffling that my children getting taken from me couldn't get me sober, and people couldn't understand that. Like, how could you continue to use drugs? But it's powerful.
Yes.
And until I was done, and I used to, like, they used to try to do these little interventions. And I used to say, we tried that, and until it's done, it's done. Just pray that I don't die out here. I didn't know how I was gonna, if I was gonna ever get sober, or how it would happen. But yeah, it had control over me.
That's good. That's what you just said something, and I saw something. Do you think that, and this, yeah, I'm sorry, we're going to flow a little bit here now. Do you think that we ever, when we're in our addiction, we ever see ourselves clean or free? Because when you said that, I went to thinking about, was there a time that I ever saw myself, while in the midst of my addiction, did I ever see myself free and clean and not using? I don't remember ever
Well,
seeing that.
it was a prayer. I mean, like, I knew that it wasn't going to happen. You kind of touched on it too. It was like I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just kind of had to, whatever the reason I'm going through this, I don't understand it. I'm just, I'm powerless. I had understood that, it was nothing that I can do on my own power because I tried
Mm-hmm.
so many times to get sober and to, different routes, different change of scenery, change of program, change of treatment, change of sponsor, whatever. It just, it never worked. Nothing worked for me. And I thought I was pretty hopeless for a while. But, um, like, when it was, I had this relationship with a higher power. When I got molested as a child, when I got a relationship, when me and my mom, nobody, I was me against the world, right? It was me against the world. I learned about God as a child. I went to Bible study and I learned about God, and I was like, okay, for whatever reason I'm here. And so I had this relationship with this higher power, but it was kind of like, it was off and on. It was kind of dysfunctional too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I didn't know what real love was. So it was when I lost that. I couldn't pray. I couldn't pray anymore, and that's when it got scary. That
That's
okay,
good.
something's,
That's
I lost that connection, that it was me and God against the world. It was just me, and I knew this world would eat me up. And so when I couldn't pray anymore, I was like, okay, this is scary. I'm full of anger. I'm full of everything. This is scary. And so I was willing to just, try something different. And that's when letting things kind of fall in place is when it took a turn. People started to show up. That's where the higher power comes in. It's not anything I could
Right.
ask for, I can do, I can make happen. It just happened. People started to show up. People started to care.
Do you
The
believe?
mentor showed up.
Do you believe that that was because you were ready for the change?
I
I'm
don't
just that's
know.
just a that's just a question because I don't know. Like I'm that for me,
That's what they say. When the student is ready, the
the
teacher
teacher,
will.
and I
Right.
think maybe because for me that's what it was. Like I
I
couldn't
like to get high.
remember.
Shit, I like to get high.
I
I
did
like to
too.
drink. It was the consequences that I didn't like. I was sober in jail. Okay, there's no drinking and numbing the feelings of me neglecting my children. I was sober in jail. So, okay, now I got to deal with this stuff, and it was very uncomfortable. And so, that is the stuff that made me want to change. If it was
Okay.
up to me, no, I would still try to, it was an escape for me. But when it stopped being an escape and I couldn't get my drug, I got arrested a whole bunch of times too, back to back to back, and I
Mm.
had to be sober in jail. So yeah, it was life. So it was God's grace and mercy
Yes.
that God. That's why I said it's just things happen, and that's why I don't chance getting high again, because I don't know if it's gonna happen again. I don't know if the things are gonna. I tried so many times to get sober that I'm not sure it'll happen again the way it happened, to where the things lined up for me to stay sober.
I think that's one of the reasons also that I stay because I would think like I remember, and this is going to sound real crazy, but I can remember my mother after I had been clean and off of crack for years. I remember us taking a trip down to Miami, and she snorted cocaine. And I remember, and by now, I'm partying and stuff, but I'm not using crack. And she offered me cocaine, and I was so afraid of cocaine. Like, and then I thought, how dare you offer me this? But my mind was made up about cocaine. Like, no, I don't want no, because I would think about what happened to me when I used cocaine. Like, I didn't want to experience that anymore. I didn't want that. I didn't want to experience that. But I remember, and that's what kept me. Like, I would go back to those days of being high. And yeah, it was good for a moment, right? It was good, real good for a moment. And then that moment gone. So it was so let me close you out with this question, Monica. What advice, because somebody's going to see this, some mother, somebody's going to see this conversation. What advice would you give that would assist in the healing and repairing of mother and children relationship?
I
Help
went to
somebody.
I went to treatment because my son was acting out, and so I tried to get us treatment to kind of work on the relationship with us. And the lady said, the son that would pray for me all the time, the lady said, "Don't give up." She was like, "No matter what, she was like, you just show up because you owe it to him. You know, he prayed for you. He was
That's
there for
good.
you. He showed up. You know, he wanted. He didn't give up on you, and so he would push me away. He was mean. He would say nasty things. He would try to push me away. And she said, that's him not wanting to deal with the hurt. Because if he pushes you away, that means that then we're just gonna get this pain over with. You know, we're gonna just get it over with. She's gonna hurt me. She's gonna go again. Let's get it over with. And so he's gonna treat you bad, but you keep showing up. You owe it to him to not give up, and you just keep showing up no matter what. Even if, like I said, my mentor used to have to kind of do it in sport, little small increments, you know, and stay prayed up through it.
Did you all go to therapy together?
No, he only did in 2 sessions. It didn't work very long. He's a little man.
That's children. That's well.
But I remember that. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's give Monica a round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. No problem. Wow. This is good. Are you guys enjoying the conversation? Hey! All right, we're gonna keep this conversation going. And next up on the mic, I like saying that, y'all. Next on the mic is Miss Cindy. And I'm gonna let Miss Cindy tell you guys a little bit about herself. But man, she was talking, and it's the reason, she probably don't know, it's the reason I asked her to be a part of this conversation, because of her perspective. Not only has she been in recovery for years, but she's managed, right? Supervised, managed, oh man, so this is a whole, so I may not got your questions right, but that's what I want to hear about that perspective. So share with the people who you are and tell them about Cindy.
Hi, my name is Cindy Burnham, and I'm still under construction.
Hey.
And I think that construction will be, I used to ask one of the elders in our 12-step program, I'd say, oh my God, how long is it going to take? You know, he said, about 20 minutes after you're dead. And I said, okay, I know. So I was a very, very wounded little girl. From the time I was about this big, I hated myself. I didn't know why. I wasn't an ugly child. I wasn't born with a special need. I just never liked myself. And I can remember way, way back. And the pieces of the puzzle came together for me many, many years later in my life, why I felt that way. I was molested as a little girl, and many, many, many times through my adolescence and my first couple of experiences in young adulthood were also, I didn't give my permission. So I had a lot of trouble and a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of stuff to try to live with as a woman. So when I discovered drugs and alcohol when I was 12 years old, of course it started with nicotine, you know, underneath the bridge, you know, smoking mom's cigarettes. And then the next thing you know, it was beer and wine and, you know, Ripple and Richard's Wild Irish Rosé wine and, you know, Boone's Farm apple wine and Strawberry Hill. Yep, that's the era I come from. And so that's my resume with as an alcoholic started with those varieties of alcohol. And that went on for me until I was in my early 30s. I have two sons. They are 43 and 42 now. I'm a great-grandmother of one, And I have 6 grandchildren, and I'm retired now. I am in the 68th chapter of my life,
Yes.
and it's the best is yet to come.
Yes.
Because I know that. I know that now based on what my God has brought me through and what continues to happen in my life. I know that I have a purpose here. I know what my purpose is. My purpose is to stay sober. My purpose is to serve my God in any way that I can. And for me, my God is love, and I know that love heals. And what I have received in my life that I never, ever knew that I needed or wanted was peace. That's all I wanted was peace. And from the time I was a little kid, so that's what I was looking for. I was looking for relief from that fear that I felt from a baby in the crib. I felt fear because of the things that were happening to me in my life. So people, places, things, money, drugs, alcohol, men, all those things were the answer to my problem. And I didn't know that the problem was me. I thought the problem were those things, and now I know that the problem starts right here, and that my answer is a loving God.
All righty. She wants to get right into the questions. I wanted to hear more, but all right. So, first question I'd like to ask is, well, you got to give us, well, you did. Um, because of your experience in, you said something on the phone when we were talking, and it triggered something for me, uh, a thought in my head. And so this is why, and let me just say this. So these questions have been so perfect. Like, it's like like I didn't know, like I just kind of threw them out there, but they've been so perfect for each of you. So thank you guys for not changing them because I gave y'all permission. How does drug, I want you to share with us, how does drug addiction affect families and communities?
Well, I can start off with my own family. First of all, I think the first relationship that I ever ruined was with God and me. I never had what you would call a personal relationship with a higher power. And once I walked away from that relationship, and that disconnect happened, then it fell on me. You know, the addiction, the relationship with myself. And how did it affect my personal family was that it first ruined my relationship with my parents, you know, and then and my brothers and my sisters, you know, our disease goes back generations. You know, my father's elders were alcoholics. My dad was an alcoholic. They hung out with alcoholic people. And then it hit my generation. And all of my brothers and sisters have been affected by the disease of alcoholism. You know, my brother hit and killed an 18-year-old girl and was, you know, he was charged with vehicular manslaughter. My sister has been arrested and gone to jail. My little brother just was arrested for the second time. He's got a good job. He's got a good family. You know, he just, when he drinks, he's an idiot, you know. And he was charged with DUI, and he was tossed in jail and lost his license for almost a year. And it ruined his family. So how has it ruined? It has absolutely affected every area of my family. My son, my oldest son is alcoholic. My youngest son is going to possibly, you know, get involved with alcoholic women or women who are, I just say they're not well, okay? And so alcoholism has affected all of our lives in many ways, financially,
Mm-hmm.
socially,
Mm-hmm.
our education, um, and it's not that I didn't have the opportunity or the potential. That was what I heard my whole life. She's not living up to her potential, and it was true. The alcohol got in the way of me living up to my potential. And how does that affect the community?
Well, yeah, let's stay right with the family first
Okay.
because you guys talk and then I go places. And so, because a lot of times we think that, let me talk about me. I never thought, my parents were heroin addicts. So that was my upbringing. I watched my parents use heavily. I'm talking my mom would be a zombie walking the streets and everybody in the neighborhood knew she was on drugs. She'd get so high that she'd walk the streets in her nightgown. So my parents were heroin addicts. So, and then all of their children, there were 5 of us. I don't know that my oldest sister was, maybe alcohol was her choice. I'm not sure, but 3 of us were crack. We used crack, and so I never really believed in that. Like that thing can be transferred down. Like we talk about generational curses and stuff, but I'm learning that it can even genetically be passed down. Like I've never you when I say you guys bring a different perspective and you have opened my eyes to so many things. It's listening to stories from Monica and Melissa and from you that makes me see it a different way because I never thought about that. And thank God I don't have any we don't go ahead and finish. I'm not gonna say that. I was going to talk about my own children, but I don't have any, addicted to drugs that I know of, thank God. But that was a serious prayer for me. Once I was free, that was a serious prayer for me to pray over my children that it didn't affect them the way that it didn't transfer down to them. Go ahead and talk about community.
Well, I think just to carry on that conversation about family is that it's not just, the children using drugs and alcohol.
Okay.
It's the fact that I was not present in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that are, the situations that have happened to them, the relationships that they have gotten into in their life it's a result of
Yes.
my not being there, being raised by babysitters, being neglected, for the times when I came home and I couldn't get up and get out and take care of them. And so their lives have been affected in many ways. How they feel about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of people that they get together with,
Good.
the friends that they
That's
have,
good.
you know, the decisions that they've made in their lives,
That's good.
because they don't
Do you
feel
ever
they
look
don't
for
feel
it in
good
your?
about themselves.
Do you look for that for like symptoms in your kids? Like I'm like obsessively, like my kids are in therapy.
Yeah, I diagnosed them a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, I'm loving this. I don't know about y'all, but I'm loving this here because it's making, it's making me think. Because I'm thinking, okay, maybe not drugs, but I have a son that's been to prison 7 times. How do I know that that didn't come from my drug use? You know what I mean? So it's not just about them using drugs. It's how it affects their lives and how it could possibly affect their lives in other ways. So, I mean, he tells me it had nothing to do with me, but that's what he says. But, now that, I've never tied those 2 things. Come on, Maurice, get in here. I've never tied my son going to prison with my drug use. And
let me
here's
say
why.
this.
Here's why. Let me tell you, his story is by the time by the time he was old enough to realize what was going on, I was no longer using.
Let me say this. I was really involved in my kids' life. I mean, all the doctors, all the schools. I volunteered all the way through. I coached them through all their sports. I had 5 sons. I coached them through baseball, football. I volunteered in the schools. The doctors knew me. In fact, my mother-in-law used to say, "What are you doing to the kids? They don't want to go back to school after you get them back well," because I knew how to love on them. So for them, I was their hero, and for me to bottom out, that made them question who they were. All my sons, fathers tell sons who they are, and they tell daughters how they're supposed to be loved. I took that away from them,
That's good.
and that affected their lives. And on top of that, I lost my baby boy. I got all my other boys off to college, and my baby boy drifted while I was trying to get treatment. He drifted, went to school, came back to vote, got in the car with some guys, and they shot a guy, and they thought my son was going to tell them they killed him. My son drifted because I wasn't on point. So my lack of being there, he might not have became a crackhead, but he gained an affinity for the streets because the relationship him and I had was so strong that he had to substitute that with something. I raised him for his first 2 years myself because we had 2 kids close to each other. He called his mom dad. That's how much we were close. So for that to be removed out of his life, he's gravitated to the streets and guys he thought was his friends. So sometimes I say to myself, I cost him his life.
Yeah, that's good. And so now I see a panel of all the children sitting up here who's been affected, telling telling their perspective of the story.
Yeah, I can definitely, understand what you're talking about, and it. I look at it now, and I've been in recovery for 35 years since December 18th, 1987. And thank you, but it's not of me. I know that like
Yes.
I know my name, and because if it was of me, I would not be sober today. And now my boys have a choice. There's no longer, I don't take blame
Yes.
because
That was the next question.
they are adult men, and maybe they don't know the answer yet, but I certainly have tried to model for them a better way of life, a relationship with God, making better choices. And I've tried to model that for them, and I ask every day in my morning prayer and meditation to ask my God to take the things from me that stand in the way of my usefulness to Him. And, through that prayer and meditation, I am a better person. And now I can be there for them, not enable them, but I can be there for them. And and now, it goes on to my grandchildren and now my little bitty great-grandchildren, that Ellie Blake. And, she's just, woohoo, she's in my heart. And that fat little thing.
That's really good that you touched on that because that's important that we realize, especially when you have adult children. Because if I had continued, and I can't even remember you guys, and I'm sure at some point I did, blame my parents for me and how I was going to turn out and what my life was going to be like. And if I had continued to focus on what my upbringing was and what happened to me and the drug addiction and the abuse and the abandonment and all of that, then I wouldn't be sitting here on this stage, right? So I had to say, okay, listen, so I made a decision that I was going to give my children better than what I received. And so Nope, I ain't perfect. Nope, didn't make all the right decisions. But I know personally that I gave them a better foundation. So now that they're adults, it's like, you're not going to blame me. I've given you the tools that you need to become. So you should want to be better than me. I need you to be better than me. I need you to do better. And so it took a little minute for me to release myself from any, especially the son that's been to prison 7 times. From, and I remember asking, like, what's wrong? How did I miss this? Like, what is going on here that this boy won't stay out of prison? Is this my fault? What did I do wrong? Where did I miss it at with him? And it took a while for me to accept that it wasn't my fault. And now his decisions are his decisions. So thank you for that reminder.
I wanted to say I have a 23-year-old daughter. I had my first kid when I was 15. And she, grew up with me too. So the grandparents brought her up basically for a long time. I had her till she was 9 years old, and then I was off to the races. So, but the cool thing about this is the part of the paradox of recovery is they heal with us too a lot of times, and
That's good.
I remember. So she's 23, and like I said, like I've always looked for this disease inside my children too. I'm always looking for it and trying to make sure that I give them the tools that they need to do whatever they need to do to overcome whatever it is, because it's a disease. It's not, and it can be anything. It can be a lot of different things. For my daughter, she was in a relationship and it was really unhealthy, and he was extremely abusive in mentally, emotionally, not so much physically. I do know she had some holes in her walls, so I'm sure there was some kind of intimidation tactic to, and she went through a severe depression. And as I got clean and started to recover and do some of my own healing, I started to see her come around more, and I started to see her. And I remember the phone call. She called me once and she said, "Mom, I'm only going to say this one time. You were right." And I said, "All right, you ready?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, I'll be there in 30 minutes. And I had all her shit packed up. My boyfriend had all the holes in her walls filled because her name's still on the lease. She's still paying on that lease right now till March, but she's living with my mom upstairs from her house. She is done with that relationship. She's about to move in next door to my duplex. She's going to be my neighbor. We have
we see the joy.
we have
in
an
your,
amazing relationship because I never thought I would ever have that relationship with
awesome.
her. And I did that. She could have been worse than what she is. I mean, I would have probably been like, oh, use that. I would have used that to benefit myself. Oh, my mom was never there, and I have all these excuses to act out in these behaviors, but she's really not like that. She's a really good girl, and luckily, thank you, God, my kids are all really, really good kids.
Yeah, I have that. Yeah. So I want to say, as we get ready to close this conversation out, I'm going to ask each of you to answer this question because we're here at the Equity and Justice, and we know what some of the problems are, right? So what are some of the solutions? So my prayer has been, what is my part in this? Where do I fit in? What's my assignment in? Because God has been dealing with me since the first of last year about telling my story more, and being accountable for others, like, allowing. So this is probably how we all connected, because God really started dealing with me about being more involved with the recovery of other women. So my question is, each of you get in your heads, I guess, is what are you going to do, Miss Cindy, to make this better for your grandchildren? Because, most of our children are grown, so give us something that we can leave here with tonight that we can take and apply or use to impact the lives of others that may be going through what we went through, have gone through, still quite don't get it. Like, I know you guys are doing, especially Melissa, doing some amazing thing. And please touch on the relationship between you two, because everybody doesn't know that there's a story here, real brief. But yeah, share with us. Give us something. Give us some wisdom, some word of advice. There are going to be other people get to hear this conversation. What do we do?
Well, for me, it's about showing up. I show up today. I show up when I don't want to be there because God showed up for me. And when there's a wedding, I show up. When there's a shower, I show up. When there's a baby being born, I show up. And when the kids call in the middle of the night, I show up. I pick up the phone. And you couldn't have counted on me before. I wasn't there. You know, I show up for my family. I show up for my friends. I show up.
Yes, you do.
And you know, like they say in my world, in my recovery world, they say suit up and show up. And so that's what you do. You brush your teeth, you wash your face, you put your clothes on, and you show up.
I love it.
So that's what I
love
do.
it. I love it.
I really don't understand the question, but I'll stick with
So-
myself.
Okay, go ahead.
So, I pretty much do the same thing. I reach out to women and people, mostly women, because I don't want it to be about anything else besides me trying to help somebody else, you know. I am always wanting to help other women. I offer everything that I can to help someone, and I have a lot of resources, and I can get anybody any help they want, and I do it. And if you tell me you want help and tell me what's going on, I'll get you that help within it'll happen that day. I'm actually bringing a girl who, I don't know if anybody heard about this, but they found a young man under a bridge 2 Saturdays ago. Well, he had 3 children, and the mother of those children is an addict, and she's using, and she was already using, but this definitely made her go off on a tailspin, and people knew who I was and connected us together, and tomorrow, me and her dad are going to pick her up and taking her into treatment, and she's willing to go. And she did not want to go. She was like, nope. But I just shared some of my experience and shared that those kids deserve a parent, and they only have one left, and you're it.
Yes.
So I will do anything for anybody else. I will help any. And I have a special needs child at home. They're not easy. I have my son who's 12 years old, and he's behavioral needs. He's got, we've really worked hard with him. I have been a consistent mother for him for actually 7 years. I've been clean for over 2. When I relapsed, he relapsed for 6 days. I had a year clean before that, relapsed for 1 day. I've been a binge relapser for about 7 years. I've actually been clean for a lot longer than I have used in 7 years, which God, thank you God, because I couldn't remember a time when I wasn't sticking a needle in my arm every 4 hours, and that's like the truth. 4 hours was a long time for me. So although I have a lot going on in my personal life, I make sure that I make time for other people, especially in our community. Like, I want more than anything to be able to, this fentanyl stuff that's going on has killed 3 of my friends in the past 3 months. And one was close. And I'm trying to be part of, even if it's so small, like we think we gotta, because like I really want to save the world. Like I do. I have that heart. I've always had that heart. I can remember being a little girl. I knew right away I was going to be a mother, and I loved taking care of other people. I loved it. If you were hurt, I wanted to help you. It didn't matter how I could do it. So I always find time for people. I don't care. And even if it's a man, I'm going to get you some help. It's not about that for me. But
and she say she didn't understand the question. You did very well.
Thank you.
I love it.
So, just to touch on the relationship I have with Miss Cindy, she's my mentor, and we worked together at the St. Petersburg Free Clinic for 9 years in the women's residence, working with women and homelessness and addiction. And I was taught compassion and respect. I was taught how to deal with others in early recovery and patience. Smiley wave, boys, because it's a rough ride here. And sometimes it was, you never know what you're gonna do in a day. But that has taught me. Well, it's given me a passion to want to work with others and show love through it, right? So I started a business called Sober Roots, and it's a natural hair care. I started after losing my hair to chemo because I had chemo not too long ago, went through that, stayed sober through it, but it was rough, and it affected my self-esteem, and the same feelings that I had in inadequacy that I had in addiction came back, not feeling myself, right, with addiction. And so self-esteem is rooted, in drug addiction. A lot of times we talked about, our past and some of the things that cause us to not feel whole. Single parent family homes. A lot of that stuff is rooted in self-esteem and self-confidence and stuff like that. So I wanted to start this company, Sober Roots, to kind of look at the inside and want to have a better quality of life, to where living a sober life, living a better, using better quality ingredients, using, having health awareness and things like that as a part of life into the community. So that is something I'm working on now. And the base of it will be compassion and respect for those who are in need. And mentorship is big too.
Yes,
Thanks.
I love it.
Hello, hello. My charge is to plant the seed of personal accountability for the safety of our community and to the hearts and mind of everybody that I meet, especially those guys who are most likely to use gun violence as a means of solving conflict. Um, my goal is to be transparent in my fight so as to show not just my children but people around me that you don't have to lay down in anything, that you can overcome all things in your past, everything. You might not live high on the hog, but you can live honorably. And that's my goal, to help kids to challenge the programming that they're getting out in the streets about the no snitching clause, or the idea that someone can say that she looked at me funny across the cafeteria, or he text something on Facebook, so come with me to do something violent, to risk your mama's dreams, your daddy's hopes, auntie's little man, or your little brother's or sister hero. No one has the right to ask you, nor do you have the right to risk all the peace of your family and the community to go do something dumb. And I hope to challenge that thinking in all kids and to teach them all to take that personal accountability and adopt a nonviolent lifestyle. Thank you.
Well, man, this has been a really great conversation. And I'm sitting here while I'm listening to each of these amazing people, and I'm thinking, like, okay, like, I just want to have an impact on. I want to make sure that when I leave here, the world is a better place for my grandchildren. And at any cost, and whatever that takes, that is. And one of my passions is sitting down having hard conversations about hard topics because they're needed. And so I want to bring those conversations that most don't have or have in a setting like this, right? So that they're public information and so that people know that there are other people dealing with some of the same things. Like people, when I shared this week that this was my third, that I had 34 years clean from crack crack cocaine. You know how many people looked at me like, what you talking about? Yeah. So never judge a book by the cover. And you don't know a person's journey and how they've arrived to where they are. And so there are some conversations that I look forward to having. I'm so grateful to have and launch the conversations with Kenya with these four amazing people. And this conversation has to continue because I really would love to have the children and maybe y'all children come and sit and talk about what it's like to grow up in that environment. You know, I know what it was like because I did, but it's a little different now, you know, once we are adults and have children. So thank you guys for being here. Super excited. Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for being here. Love you guys. Yeah, conversations with Kenya continue. DJ.
In the truth game, showing off.